Chess YouTube, what is happening? In today's video, we have Daniel Naroditsky, the man, the myth, the legend, the speed demon himself, facing off versus his mortal enemy, Vladimir Kramnik, in this chess.com blitz game. And what does Daniel do in this game to poor old Vladimir? I'll tell you what he does. He sacrifices the knight on the f2 square, blowing open the king side and starting the attack against the white king. This game was simply insane. Let's dive right in. All right, in the game, Vladimir here playing as white, opens 1d4. Daniel, knight f6. We have knight f3, g6, g3, bishop g7, bishop g2, castles, and finally d5. So far, both sides playing the exact same moves here as white and as black, but finally here on move 6, Vladimir, he does break the symmetry. He plays the move c4, the queen's gambit style move, giving up the pawn on c4 if black wants it. Now black here has two main ideas, taking the free pawn or going c6, bolstering d5 with the c pawn. In the game, Daniel here, he goes for the more combative idea and he does capture on c4. D takes c4 is the idea. And now Vladimir, what do you want to do about this hanging pawn on c4? Do you capture it? Do you attack it? Do you ignore it and go e4 somehow? Rook e1, e4, and so on. What is the idea? Well, in the game, Vladimir here plays the strongest idea according to Stockfish. Very curious, let's say. And he plays the move knight to a3, attacking the pawn on the c4 square. All right, from here, Daniel plays the main line as black. That is the idea of c3. A very odd-looking move, but the idea is the pawn on c4 is going to be lost one way or another. Therefore, you go c3, giving up the pawn, but damaging white's pawn structure a little bit. After c3, white takes back, and then Daniel does go c5, attacking the pawn on d4 and giving himself a little target in the center. So that is the entire idea, trying to give back that pawn under better circumstances. All right, Vladimir, the move is rook e1, setting up the idea of e4 if he wants it. Black, knight c6. Vladimir, bishop b2, and black queen to b6, flying out with the queen, pressuring d4, pressuring b2. Overall, a very active idea. And Vladimir, what does he do right here? He's got to find a good way to defend the bishop, and it's very important to find the right idea. If you go, for example, I don't know, queen to c2, then bishop f5 will ruin your day in an instant. Instead, here, Vladimir finds the best idea. That is simply knight c4, a multi-purpose idea, jumping in with the knight, defending bishop b2, and also hitting the queen on b6, making it look a little bit silly. Black here plays the move queen to a6, targeting once again this knight and eyeing the a2 pawn as well. All right, Vladimir, how do you respond to the threat? Well, here, white plays the idea of knight f to e5, which at first glance looks really, really strong. You jump in with that knight, you defend c4, you attack knight c6 with the bishop, and so on. A very good idea, or so it seems, but it turns out this is not the right way, and it's a little bit too aggressive. Black has many ideas, the strongest of them being bishop e6, targeting the weak knight on c4, and from there, white is under a little bit of pressure. Now, instead, in the game, Daniel here plays the move simply knight takes e5, a slightly dubious idea, but the game goes on. From here, Vladimir, he takes back on e5 with that knight. Of course, knight c4 is hanging, therefore knight takes e5 is forced. Knight takes e5 on the board. Daniel, bishop e6, an active idea. Vladimir, e4 is the idea. Then we have c takes, and finally rook f to d8. Now, in this position, the battle lines have been drawn. Daniel has the immense pressure on the white pawn center. Meanwhile, Vladimir is going to have to find some way to go either d5 or e5 at some point and get a big attack going in the center and on the king side. But if black can hold off the attack, he will be much better in the long run. All right, from here, Vladimir, what do you want to do as white? Well, the computer gives queen d2 or knight d3, but instead, he goes for it right away with the idea of d5. Now, this move right here is very committal. Once you go d5, obviously, pawns don't go backwards. You can't take back the move, so to speak. But beyond that, this pawn move, I mean, it weakens a lot of dark squares, e5, c5, and so on, and you lose a lot of flexibility with those pawns in general. Now, at first glance, this move looks very good. After all, you push back the bishop, black's going to go bishop d7 or bishop c8 and so on, and it looks very active, but Daniel here, this guy shows why he is simply in a league of his own. Vladimir has nothing on this guy. And he busts out the idea of knight to g4, the bishop sacrifice. Of course, for right now, it's not a real sack. After all, the bishop cannot be taken. The pawn on d5 is pinned by the rook on d8 to the queen on the d1 square. But beyond that, this move here, it attacks the knight with 2 pieces. You have the pin on that knight from the bishop on g7 to the piece on b2. I mean, black here has so many ideas going, not to mention the pressure on f2, which may be a big deal later in this game. All right, from here, Vladimir, he's got to find the right response. What do you do right here? The key idea is knight d3. Vladimir, he finds it. He retreats the knight, defends b2, and so on. But Daniel, he's having absolutely none of it, and he busts out the unthinkable, the unfathomable, the unconscionable. Knight takes f2, which turns out to be a shockingly brilliant move. What is the idea? It is so simple. The knight, if you take it, black is going to win back that piece plus interest. Now, first of all, the queen on d1 is under attack. You simply must take the knight. If you take, for example, the bishop on g7, you lose the queen on d1. You can't do that. Therefore, here, you gotta capture that knight with the knight or the king. First of all, knight takes is a massive blunder. Black takes the bishop and wins the game. Now, instead of that, in the game, Vladimir here, he takes with the king. So what is Daniel's idea? Why did he sack the knight like this in spectacular fashion, by the way? Well, here's the idea. First of all, bishop takes b2 is the idea. White takes back, and then, very simply, queen to b6, sliding over, hitting the king and the knight. Daniel, he wins back the piece, plus the pawn, plus has the ongoing attack against the white king. And Daniel here is in a fantastic position. We have king to f1, queen takes b2, completing the idea. And keep in mind, the bishop on e6 is still untakeable. It's poisoned, as then you lose the queen on d1 via the rook. All right, from here, Vladimir, queen b3 is the idea. Simply offering the trade of queens, and black does accept. We have queen takes, a takes, and then bishop d7. From here, e5 is the idea, gaining space in the center, and then bishop b5 check hits the king on the f1 square. We have king to f2, and finally a5, gaining space on the queen's side. Now rook ec1, b6, and then rook c7, and finally rook d7. All right, you know what? Let's slow down right here and do inventory. We have an endgame. Vladimir and Daniel are in the endgame. Daniel is up the single pawn. That is very important. Now, Vladimir, to his credit, has the very active rook on c7. So white's idea here is to try and control the open c-file, maybe go, for example, rook a to c1, defend the rook on c7, and so on. And despite being down the pawn, if he can be active, if he can, for example, push the d-pawn down the board, get a pass pawn, and so on, he may have decent chances. On the other hand, if black can neutralize the white threat, neutralize that rook, neutralize these pawns on d5 and e5, and get his pawns rolling down the board on the queen's side, he would be simply winning in this game. So Vladimir, right here, he has a very big decision. His rook on c7 is under attack by the black rook on d7. What do you do about the attack on that rook? Well, the obvious idea is really simply rook a to c1, defend the rook, keep the game going. But instead, Vladimir here, he has a malfunction. His brain implodes. He plays the very dubious, unconscionable idea of rook takes d7. Poor old Vladimir, failing to demonstrate sagacity in this game, capturing the rook. Black takes back, and then we have king to e3. He marches the king down the board, but Daniel, rook c8. He dominates the open c-file. White cannot go rook c1. Vladimir, what on earth are you doing? Did you malfunction? Are you... I can't even think of an analogy to explain this complete and utter strategic failure by Vladimir in this game. He's failing like his overall credibility has in the year 2025. All right, Vladimir continues. King d4, marching the king. Black, king to f8, sliding over with his king. Vladimir, bishop f1, trying to find a better square for the bishop. But black here, rook to c2. The rook is now a pig on the second rank, eyeing the h2 pawn and so on. And Vladimir, what are you doing? I mean, where is your compensation for that pawn? I don't know. Vladimir, bishop d3, giving up that pawn on h2 if black wants it, but instead rook b2 is the idea, targeting b3. The idea being if that pawn falls on b3, black is going to have two passed pawns on a5 and b6, and Daniel, he knows that pawn on b3 is more important than that pawn on h2. Therefore, rook b3 is the idea. All right, Vladimir, rook c1, rook takes b3, rook c7, and then rook b4 check hits the king, king to e3, and finally bishop b5, offering the bishop trade. Now in this position, this might be Vladimir's last chance to find a way to claw back in this game, and he's got to find the right idea right here, right now. If he doesn't, he is simply cooked. Now the computer here likes the idea of bishop to e4, maintaining all the pieces on the board, at least for right now, the rooks, the bishops, and so on. But instead, Vladimir, he has yet another malfunction. Rook c8 hits the king, king g7, and now bishop takes b5, rook takes b5. Vladimir, don't you know this endgame is completely lost if black plays correctly? Apparently, he doesn't know. Vladimir getting cooked in this game. All right, from here, Vladimir, king d4, marching his king down the board, but black, rook to b1 is the idea, making space for these pawns to come rolling down the board ASAP. All right, rook a8, guards a5, rook d1, hits the king, king c4, and now e6. A very precise move, the idea being forcing the white pawn to go to d6. d6 is the idea by Vladimir, but now the rook on d1 guards d7 perfectly, and there's nothing Vladimir can do in this game. Rook d5 is the idea, flying up with that rook. Rook to e8, guarding, I don't know, e7, b5 check, hits the king, king c3, and now h5. Daniel, he's in no rush. He marches every single pawn down the board, and now both sides under extreme time pressure. Black having less than 8 seconds left. Vladimir just 4.4 left. All right, here we go. h4 is the idea. Then Daniel, g5, the very precise move. The point being, if you take that pawn, king g6 activates the king on the king side, and black has yet another active piece in this game. All right, h takes, king g6, rook g8 check, king to f5, the king march continues, and there's nothing that white can do. Rook g7, king takes e5 is the idea, winning that pawn, and next the pawn on d6. We have d7, Vladimir flailing around, doing his very best to fight back in this game, but it's simply not enough. We have rook takes d7, capturing the free pawn, and defending f7 in the process. And poor Vladimir here, he's down literally, let's see, 1, 2, 3 pawns. Oh, Vladimir, this is just not your day. g6, his last chance. The point being, if you take the pawn, the rook on d7 does fall, but Daniel, he is not falling for it. Oh no, the move to finish the game is king to f6, hits the rook, hits the pawn, and Vladimir, he is forced to resign on the spot to Daniel Naroditsky. Wow, what a game by Daniel and Vladimir. Of course, Daniel finishing off his inferior opponent in this game, in the endgame. And of course, the incredible idea by Daniel of simply knight takes f2 in the middle game, showing he is simply in a league of his own versus Vladimir. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please comment down below. What did you think of this game? What do you think of the ongoing Daniel, Vladimir drama and so on? Personally, I think the chess here speaks for itself, but that is just me. And by the way, if you are stuck watching endless chess YouTube videos and you just can't make the progress you want to in online chess, I do have the solution for you. Head over to drmikechess.com. It's my free online chess community where I have courses, group coaching, game reviews, ongoing support, and so on. Everything you need to succeed in the year 2025 and beyond. So I'll see you there. And as always, I wish you the best of luck in your chess improvement journey in 2025 and beyond. And I'll see you in the next video.